Sergeant Emily Rains had never been one to chase the spotlight. A quiet, disciplined officer from a small Texas town, she let her work speak for itself. Over her 10 years in law enforcement, she had earned respect through grit, sharp instincts, and one unique asset, her K9 partner, Jacques, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois with piercing amber eyes and unmatched agility. Jacques was more than just a dog. He was her partner, her protector, and in many ways, her only real family. Emily and Jacques had been paired during her first year in the K9 unit. Their bond had been instant. Unlike other pairings, Jacques didn't need months of adjustment. From the first day of training, he responded only to her commands, ignored other officers, and refused to sleep unless she was near. Trainers joked that Emily had imprinted on him like something out of a nature documentary. But those who worked with them soon realized it wasn't a joke. It was real. Together, they busted drug rings, tracked missing persons, and even survived a high-speed chase that ended in a shootout. Through it all, Emily kept her cool, and Jacques never flinched. Their record became a model for K9 teams statewide. Emily had been offered promotions, desk jobs, even media features, but she turned them down. "I'm not done working the streets," she always said. "Jacques and I have more to do." Everything changed one humid summer night. It was supposed to be a routine drug raid. Intelligence reported a stash house tied to a major cartel operating out of an abandoned warehouse in the outskirts of Houston. Emily was leading the entry team. Jacques was geared up, his black tactical vest tight around his frame, Police K9, written in bold yellow letters across his side. She had checked his eyes, his paws, and given him that final whisper they shared before every operation. "With me, always." The team breached the door at 2:14 a.m. What happened next became the subject of national headlines, courtroom debates, and emotional protests. Inside the warehouse, things spiraled fast. Gunfire erupted almost immediately. A suspect emerged from behind stacked crates, weapon drawn. In the confusion, one man went down, a civilian. His name was Miguel Castillo, a 24-year-old undocumented worker who claimed to be sleeping in the building without knowledge of the drugs inside. He died on the scene from a gunshot to the chest. The shot, investigators claimed, came from Emily's service weapon. Reports began surfacing within hours. A decorated officer involved in a fatal shooting. A K9 unit gone rogue. Emily was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. The body cam footage from that night? Missing. Jacques had been with her the entire time, and if he could talk, maybe the truth would have surfaced sooner. But for now, all anyone had was speculation, and a grieving family demanding justice. Emily didn't speak to the press. She didn't post online. She didn't argue or cry or plead. She stayed quiet, waiting for facts to clear her name. But the silence didn't help her. The narrative was already writing itself. A trigger-happy officer taking an innocent life. The community that once celebrated her turned suspicious. Even some fellow officers distanced themselves, unsure of what to believe. Jacques knew something was wrong. At the station, he refused to eat. He'd sit facing the glass window of Emily's now empty office. When someone tried to leash him for training, he'd growl, not in aggression, but confusion, like a soldier left behind without orders. One handler noted that Jacques wouldn't even respond to the word search, a command he used to spring. Toward with excitement, the department made the decision to separate them officially. Jacques would be reassigned to a new officer for retraining. Emily wasn't allowed to say goodbye. When the trainer approached Jacques with his new partner, the dog stood stiff, unmoving. As the new officer attempted a basic heel command, Jacques didn't flinch. When given the search cue, he stared ahead blankly. It was clear Jacques would not work with anyone else. A week later, He was retired from service. He was returned to Emily's family farm, where she had grown up before joining the academy. Her parents agreed to care for him temporarily. But from the moment he arrived, Jacques did the same thing every day. He sat by the front gate, eyes focused on the long gravel road leading back toward town, as if waiting for a car that never came. Neighbors began to notice. He just sits there, from sunrise to sunset, one said. Doesn't bark, doesn't move, just waits. Some took pictures. Others brought treats. A few tried to distract him with toys, but Jacques remained still, always facing the road. Meanwhile, Emily's situation worsened. The district attorney pushed for a full trial, arguing that Emily had used unnecessary lethal force. With the body cam footage still missing, and the only eyewitness testimony pointing toward her, prosecutors had what they needed. Charges were filed. Second-degree murder. Emily was arrested in front of cameras, her hands cuffed behind her back. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. Her eyes, however, told a different story. Cold, focused, like she was still in control, even if the world around her was collapsing. As she was driven away, Jacques, back at the farm, lifted his head for the first time in hours and let out a single piercing howl. Emily's trial was now set. The headlines read like fiction. Hero officer or cold killer? K9 refuses new partner after officer's arrest. Justice for Miguel versus justice for Emily. The world was watching, and Jacques, loyal, silent, waiting, was watching too. Emily Raines sat silently at the defendant's table, her posture upright, uniform replaced with a pale blue jumpsuit. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Flashbulbs flared from outside as the media swarmed the courthouse. Reporters shouted headlines into their cameras. Inside, though, the air was cold, sharp, and heavy with judgment. Everyone had picked a side. The prosecution opened strong. They framed Emily as aggressive, a veteran who had crossed the line from law enforcement into lawlessness. They played the emotional angle hard, showing photos of Miguel Castillo, a smiling young man with dreams, robbed of life by a bullet they claimed came from Emily's gun. The defense countered that the raid was chaotic, and Emily had followed protocol. They argued that multiple officers were firing, and no ballistic match had been confirmed. But they were swimming against the tide. The missing body cam footage created a void, and the prosecution filled it with damning theory. Witnesses took the stand. A fellow officer claimed he saw Emily in the direction of the shot. Another admitted he didn't see the exact moment, but believed she fired. No one could say with certainty what happened. Still, the tone of the trial began to shift against her, and all the while, outside the courthouse, Jacques waited. Emily's family brought him on the first day, hoping to comfort her during transport. But the moment he stepped out of the vehicle, Jacques pulled against his leash, eyes fixed on the building as if he knew she was inside. He lay by the steps, refusing to move. He growled at the bailiffs, not out of hostility, but fear, a primal need to protect. As the days passed, he developed a routine. Each morning, he would take his place by the courthouse doors. By afternoon, he'd curl beside the concrete planter. At dusk, he'd howl once, just once, before being gently pulled away. His loyalty drew attention fast. A local reporter captured a video of Jacques licking the courtroom doors after a recess. The footage went viral. The caption read, "A dog's heart knows what justice forgets." Within hours, support groups formed online. Pet lovers, veterans, and former officers began questioning the narrative. Was this the behavior of a dog whose partner was a murderer? The court, however, ignored the emotional wave. On the 7th day of the trial, a bombshell dropped. The prosecution presented new forensic analysis. Gunshot residue was found on Emily's gloves. The defense objected, citing contamination and chain of custody issues. But the damage was done. The jury saw what they believed to be solid proof. Emily didn't flinch. Inside her, rage burned. Not just because she was being accused, but because she knew something was wrong. Someone was lying. She remembered the chaos of that night, the shouting, the muzzle flashes, the confusion. She knew she didn't fire that fatal shot. But without the footage to prove it, no one would believe her. Even worse, her own department had gone silent. Officers who once called her the best of us no longer returned her calls. Her commander released a statement of full cooperation with the legal process, carefully avoiding words like loyalty or support. She was alone, except for Jocks. On day 10, the jury went into deliberation. Outside, rain fell hard. News anchors stood under umbrellas, reporting every minute detail. Jocks refused to be left behind. Soaked and shivering, he curled under the awning. Eyes locked on the front doors, and then the verdict. The courtroom filled within minutes. Emily sat motionless, eyes steady, lips tight. The judge entered. The jury foreman stood. Guilty. There was no air left in the room. Emily's mother gasped. The prosecution nodded solemnly. The defense attorney lowered his head, stunned. Emily closed her eyes. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then she looked up and whispered only one word. Jocks. Outside, as if he heard her name on the wind, Jocks jumped up. He pulled forward, barking with a force that startled nearby officers. He fought his leash, barking louder, frantic. Security tried to calm him, but he wouldn't stop. He could feel it. Something had broken. The judge struck the gavel 3 times. Sentencing will commence tomorrow, he said. Court is adjourned. Emily was escorted out in cuffs. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras clicked rapidly. Jocks caught a glimpse of her through the glass window as she passed. His body froze. His bark choked into a low whine. He lunged forward again, but was held back. That night, a video of Jocks howling at the jail gates racked up millions of views. People cried watching it. A veteran wrote, "We don't deserve dogs like this." A child in Wisconsin made a drawing of Jocks wearing a superhero cape titled Justice Dog. The story had transcended facts. Now it was about loyalty, faith, and the possibility that justice had made a grave mistake. Emily, back in her cell, stared at the wall. The trial was over. The truth, whatever it was, had been buried beneath politics and fear. She knew what came next. The death penalty wasn't just for monsters anymore. It was for scapegoats. The only thing that made her hold on was the memory of Jocks' eyes. Clear, fierce, unwavering. That dog believed in her when no one else did. Outside, in the shadows of the prison fence, Jocks still waited. He wouldn't leave. Not until something changed. The courtroom was quieter than anyone expected. There was no shouting, no outrage, no loud objections when the judge returned the following day. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, echoing in the silence. Emily stood as the judge entered, chained at the wrists and ankles, her expression hollow, but still composed. When the sentence was read aloud, death by lethal injection, time froze. It wasn't just the courtroom that gasped. Across the country, people watching the live stream blinked in disbelief. Even the reporters, known for maintaining cold professionalism, dropped their pens. Emily Raines, once hailed as a hero in uniform, had just been condemned to die. Inside the chamber, she barely reacted. Her hands remained steady. Her face didn't twitch. Her attorney's voice cracked as he muttered, "We'll appeal." Emily simply gave a small nod. She'd expected this. The moment the body cam footage went missing, the moment the department turned its back, she knew she was being fed to the wolves. But what no one expected was what happened next. Outside, in the parking lot crowded with news vans, protest signs, and police vehicles, Jocks, who had remained calm for nearly an hour, suddenly lunged forward with a force that caught his handler completely off guard. The leash slipped. The crowd parted as Jocks bolted toward the main entrance of the courthouse. A security guard stepped in his path, but the dog didn't bite. Instead, he barked once, loud, clear, commanding, and sat directly in front of the glass doors. He scratched at the glass and then sat again, posture stiff, ears up, refusing to move. Reporters rushed in. Cameras clicked furiously. "He's protesting," someone whispered. "No," someone else said. "He's waiting." Guards tried to move him, coax him with treats, or guide him away. He growled softly, but didn't bare teeth. It was not aggression. It was grief. Deep and knowing. A silent resistance. Emily's father arrived minutes later to retrieve him, but Jocks refused to budge. He barked at him too, not with anger, but defiance. Emily, watching the live feed from a monitor in her holding cell, dropped her head in her hands. She couldn't cry, not in front of guards, not now, but her throat ached with emotion. "What are you doing, boy?" she whispered. "You have to let go." But Jocks wouldn't. By nightfall, the news channels had shifted their focus. From the sentencing to the K9's unexpected protest, social media exploded with videos of Jacks's face pressed against the glass, his ears twitching with every sound inside. People were calling him the dog who wouldn't let go. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for Emily. Hashtag free JAX. Hashtag loyal beyond law. And still, Emily sat alone in a prison cell, watching it unfold through a 12-inch television, heart heavy with guilt, pain, and confusion. The next morning, Jocks was physically carried away after he collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration. A vet checked him and said, "He's not sick, he's grieving." Back at the farm, Jocks stopped eating. He paced in wide circles at night. At sunrise, he returned to his post at the gate. The Rains family feared he would starve himself. A neighbor, moved by the dog's devotion, brought over steak, warm broth, and even bacon, but Jocks only sniffed, then looked away. Meanwhile, Emily was transferred to a maximum security prison. Her new world was gray and metallic. The guards treated her with caution. Not cruel, not friendly, just distant. One of them whispered to her, "I watched the video. The one of your dog. If that dog believes in you, I think you might be innocent." Emily gave him a tired look. "He always knew who I was, even when I didn't." Back at the state capitol, the sentencing stirred controversy. Civil rights groups began questioning the speed of the verdict, the pressure on the court, and most importantly, the missing body cam footage. Where had it gone? Why had no backups been found? A few whispers of corruption emerged, but they were quickly silenced, until Detective Ron Heller spoke up. Heller had been Emily's training officer, a gruff, no-nonsense veteran who'd worked narcotics for 20 years. He hadn't spoken publicly during the trial, but after watching the footage of Jocks's courthouse protest, something inside him shifted. "Dogs don't lie," he said during a televised interview. "You can train them to track, bite, sit, but loyalty? That's not trained, it's earned. And if Jocks is still waiting, then so am I." He launched his own review of the case. Off the books. He called in favors, requested archived evidence, and started digging into the digital logs of the night of the raid. And what he found was disturbing. The backup server, which stored raw body cam footage, had suspicious access logs. Someone had deleted a file at 3:07 a.m., less than an hour after the raid. The username on the log? a high-ranking officer in the task force, a man who had retired shortly after Emily's arrest. Heller reached out to a tech specialist who helped recover fragments of the deleted footage. What they found wasn't complete, but it was enough. The angle showed gunfire erupting, and the bullet that struck Miguel? It didn't come from Emily's position. It came from her left, from someone else entirely. The footage also showed Emily lowering her weapon seconds before the fatal shot. She had seen something, perhaps realized a civilian was present. That pause, her restraint, was damning not of her guilt, but of someone else's. Now Heller had evidence. But would the courts listen? As he prepared his report, Jacques was growing weaker. Emily's parents begged him to eat. Vets offered 4 fluids. Nothing helped. The dog remained by the gate each morning, then walked slowly to the oak tree, where Emily used to train him. One night, lightning split the sky. Thunder rolled across the countryside. Rain poured for hours. But when Emily's father checked on Jacques, he wasn't at the gate. He found him under the oak, wet, shaking, but alive, staring into the distance. And then he did something he hadn't done in weeks. He barked, once, loud, echoing across the fields. A neighbor who had come to check on the dog turned to Emily's father and said, "I don't know what that means, but it sounds like something's about to change." Jacques' bark that night wasn't just a sound, it was a signal. The dog who had spent weeks in silent mourning suddenly seemed alert, almost reawakened. He stood from under the oak tree, looked back at Emily's father, and trotted toward the house with a determined gait. He hadn't done that since Emily was arrested. The old man stood stunned, unsure what had changed, but grateful that Jacques was finally moving again. Inside, Emily's mother watched the footage that Detective Heller had shared in a private message. The recovered body cam clip was grainy and incomplete, but it showed what the courtroom never did. Emily lowering her weapon seconds before the fatal shot. Another figure, barely visible, stepped forward in the chaos. The angle captured only a glint of metal and a hand pulling a trigger. It wasn't Emily. Emily's father reviewed the footage again and again. "It's not her," he whispered. "She didn't do it." Meanwhile, Heller was working nonstop. He knew the courts would be reluctant to reopen a case already settled by a high-profile conviction. So he built his own team, a pair of retired tech experts, one former prosecutor, and an ex-journalist who'd once covered corruption in law enforcement. Together, they began unraveling the events of that fateful night. They discovered that the original body cam server wasn't just accessed. It was wiped using a secure clearance code issued to only 3 senior officers. One of them, Captain Darren Wexley, had submitted his early retirement just days after Emily's sentencing. That timing now looked suspicious. While the investigation quietly gained momentum, something unusual happened on the farm. Jacques began digging. Each morning, after sitting at the gate for exactly 10 minutes, he would walk to the east side of the property and start scratching at the base of the oak tree. Emily's father assumed he was burying food or toys, but when he checked the area, there was nothing, just soft dirt. But Jacques kept digging, stopping only to rest his paws. By the 3rd day, he had cleared a sizable patch. And then, on the 4th morning, he stopped digging and just sat there, tail still, eyes focused on the tree trunk. No one could explain it. It was as if the dog was waiting for something to emerge from the ground itself. That evening, Emily's mother received a call. "Mrs. Raines," Heller said, voice steady but tense, "I think we've got enough to petition the court. I'm submitting the request tomorrow." She didn't respond for a moment. Her eyes filled with tears. Then quietly, she asked, "Can we tell Emily?" The prison allowed Emily a monitored video call once a week. That Friday, as the screen flickered to life, She saw her mother's smiling face and Jacques beside her. The dog's ears perked at the sound of her voice. "Jacques, baby," she said, her voice trembling. And then, for the first time since her arrest, Jacques barked at the screen, not mournfully, not in confusion, but loud, alert, and proud. Emily blinked hard. Her hands trembled. "What's going on?" Her mother leaned in. "Ron Heller has proof. He's reopening the case." Emily sat in stunned silence. She'd buried hope so deeply that she didn't recognize the feeling when it rose again. Jacques barked a second time. It was real. The next day, Heller filed a motion with the district court, attaching a 68-page document with timestamps, digital records, witness contradictions, and most importantly, the recovered video clip. It hit the press like lightning. The headlines lit up. New evidence could overturn death sentence for Officer Rains. Corrupt cover-up? Retired captain under scrutiny. K9's loyalty points toward truth. Suddenly, people weren't just interested. They were outraged. Journalists demanded interviews with Captain Wexley. Protesters returned to the courthouse steps. Former officers publicly questioned the investigation. And in the middle of it all, Jacques became a symbol of truth. TV hosts replayed his videos on loop. Talk shows featured animal behavior experts discussing canine loyalty and intelligence. A photo of Jacques sitting at the courthouse doors with the words "he knew" superimposed in bold letters went viral worldwide. Jacques wasn't just a dog anymore. He was the heart of a growing movement. Within a week, the district court granted a preliminary hearing to review the new evidence. Emily would finally have a chance to be heard and seen with the truth. On her side, the morning of the hearing, Jacques woke up before dawn. He sat by the window, looking toward the road. When Emily's father opened the door, Jacques walked out, sat by the gate, and waited. Again, but this time his tail wagged. And inside the house, Emily's mother watched live footage of her daughter being transported back to court, face calm, but eyes alight with something she hadn't shown in months: hope. In the courtroom, Heller took the stand as an expert witness. He explained how the footage was recovered, how the server had been tampered with, and who had access. He described the missing seconds of video that could have exonerated Emily from the beginning. When the judge watched the clip on the courtroom screen, the room went dead silent. The grainy footage showed the suspect, the flash, the angle of the shot. It wasn't Emily. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge leaned back in his chair, took off his glasses, and said the words Emily had only dreamed of hearing. "This court hereby vacates the conviction of Sergeant Emily Rains. All charges are dropped pending further investigation." The courtroom erupted. Her mother collapsed into tears. Heller hugged Emily's attorney. And Emily? She looked straight at the back doors, where she knew Jacques wasn't allowed, but still waiting. That afternoon, as she walked down the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed. Microphones in her face, flashes everywhere. But all she saw was Jacques, pulling forward through the crowd, straining against his leash, then breaking free as someone let go. He ran like a missile, tail flying, tongue out, eyes locked on one person only. Emily dropped to her knees. "Jacques?" He launched into her arms, licking her face, circling her, whining with joy, and finally collapsing against her chest. Everyone around them paused and applauded. That moment would be replayed on screens around the world. And the caption that followed said it all. He waited. She returned. Justice barked back. The reunion between Emily and Jacques made national headlines. Networks across the globe played the clip, the moment Jacques broke from the crowd and barreled into her arms like a cannon of love and justice. That single embrace seemed to undo months of silence and grief. Emily clung to him as if letting go might break the spell, like she'd wake up and find herself back in that cold cell, dreaming again. But it was real. What came next, however, wasn't peace. It was fire. The reopened case triggered a flood of revelations. Detective Ron Heller, now acting as a special independent investigator, dove deeper into the original raid. His mission was no longer just about Emily's exoneration. It was about exposing what really happened that night and who had worked so hard to hide it. At the center of it all was retired Captain Darren Wexley. Heller, with the help of 2 former cybercrime agents, gained access to the department's encrypted logs. What they discovered was chilling. Just 40 minutes after the raid, someone logged into the body cam archive using Wexley's ID, bypassed security protocols, and permanently deleted specific files, including the full footage from Emily's team. Even worse, a suppressed report from a junior officer stated he had heard a second shot come from the far left corner, the exact position Wexley had been stationed during the raid. The final blow came when a retired ballistics expert agreed to re-examine the evidence. His findings confirmed that the bullet pulled from Miguel Castillo's chest didn't match Emily's service weapon at all. The ballistics report submitted during the trial had been falsified. The truth was ugly. Wexley, fearful of fallout from a botched raid that had resulted in the death of a civilian, had panicked. With his retirement approaching and a clean record to protect, he framed the only officer who wouldn't challenge him, the one with a spotless background and no political ties, Emily. And when the public demanded justice, he let her take the fall without blinking. The media flipped almost overnight. Talk shows that once questioned Emily's morality now condemned the department. News anchors called for mass resignations. Protesters gathered, but this time with signs that read, "Set her free." Jacques knew first. Justice for Emily. Accountability for all. Jacques, though unaware of the media frenzy, was thriving. His appetite returned. He was playful again, chasing squirrels, rolling in grass, and sleeping at Emily's feet. He never let her out of sight. When she stepped away, even for a minute, he followed, watching protectively. Their bond, tested by fire, was now stronger than ever. One afternoon, Emily stood on the porch of her parents' farmhouse, watching the wind ripple across the fields. Jacques sat beside her, eyes closed, face toward the sun. "I'm free because of you," she whispered. He opened one eye, licked her hand, and leaned into her. Back in the city, the district attorney launched a formal inquiry into Wexley's actions. Days later, with evidence mounting, Wexley was arrested for obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, perjury, and conspiracy. His mugshot splashed across every news outlet. The same man who once signed Emily's arrest order now sat behind bars, silent, disgraced. Emily was asked to return to the department, an offer she politely declined. "I've worn the badge. I know what it should stand for. But I also know what it's been allowed to become," she told a reporter. "I won't wear it again until it earns its honor back." Instead, Emily focused on healing. With help from supporters and donations that had poured in since her release, she founded a new organization, the Jacques Project, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting wrongfully accused officers and abandoned service dogs. Their mission was simple: uncover truth, restore lives, and protect those who served with integrity, both human and canine. The launch event was held at a local Veterans Memorial Park. Hundreds showed up: former officers, soldiers, K9 units, and families from across the country. Emily stood on stage with Jacques at her side, a microphone in one hand, the leash in the other. "I was silenced by a system that didn't care about truth," she said. But he wasn't. He waited. He watched. He believed. And because of that, I stand here today. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Jocks barked once, loud and proud, drawing laughter and tears from everyone present. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Jocks began traveling the country, speaking at law enforcement academies, animal shelters, and legal conferences. Their message was clear. Loyalty matters, truth matters, and sometimes the voice that speaks loudest doesn't come from words. It comes from actions. Jocks became a national symbol of truth and devotion. A bronze statue was commissioned in his likeness, later placed at the entrance of the Texas State Police Academy. The inscription at the base read, "He waited for the truth and never left her side." Still, Emily remained humble. "Jocks didn't save me because he's a hero," she told a journalist. "He saved me because he's my partner, and I never stopped being his." Despite the attention, Emily avoided television shows, book deals, and sponsorships. She focused on those who'd been forgotten, the wrongly accused, the silenced, the abandoned. Jocks was always with her, a calm presence beside her boots, eyes scanning each room with the same alertness he'd had on patrol. But some wounds healed slower than others. At night, Emily still had nightmares of the raid, the courtroom, the cell. Some days, the injustice burned inside her like acid. But every morning, when she opened her eyes and saw Jocks' face, beside her, everything softened. His presence reminded her that even when the world falls apart, loyalty holds it together. And that loyalty, in Jocks' case, had not only saved her life, it had saved her soul. The morning was cool and unusually quiet in downtown Austin, Texas. The governor's mansion stood in dignified silence behind black iron gates and rows of red roses. At precisely 6:42 a.m., a state trooper on patrol spotted something unusual. Near the east entrance gate, a lone dog sitting calmly, tail tucked, head high, staring directly into the mansion's courtyard. It was Jocks. At first, the trooper thought he might be a stray. But as he stepped closer, recognition hit him like a bolt. This wasn't just any dog. It was the dog. The K9 who had refused to leave his partner's side. The dog who had brought down a corrupt captain and helped free a wrongfully condemned officer. Jocks had become a symbol of loyalty and truth across the nation. And now, he was sitting outside the governor's mansion, alone, quiet, unmoving. Within minutes, security officials rushed out. They tried to coax him back with treats and soft voices. Jocks didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't move. He just sat, breathing steadily, looking forward, as if he had come there with purpose. Emily, unaware of her partner's bold new protest, was asleep in a hotel a few blocks away. She and Jocks had been in Austin for a speaking engagement scheduled at the State Law Enforcement Academy. She had gone to bed late, assuming he was curled beside the bed, like always. But when she woke around 7 a.m., Jocks was gone. Panic hit her like a truck. She tore through the room, calling his name, checking the hallways, the lobby, the alley behind the hotel. No sign. Her hands shook as she dialed the police. While she waited for a response, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her lawyer. "Turn on the news. Jocks is at the governor's mansion." Emily ran to the lobby, where a small crowd had gathered around a television screen. There, broadcast live on every major channel, was Jocks, sitting like a statue, outside the gates of power. The anchors were already spinning headlines. Loyal K9 makes a silent stand at Texas governor's mansion. Justice still has 4 paws. Jocks returns to the spotlight. K9 hero demands change, symbolic protest, or political message? Emily's heart pounded as she watched. She couldn't believe it. Jocks had slipped out of their hotel room, crossed multiple city blocks, and somehow found his way to the one place that had the authority to influence lasting reform. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, but the message was clear. The people understood. The media understood. By 9 a.m., the governor himself stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, bewildered by the sight before him. His security team offered to remove the dog. He shook his head. "No," he said softly. "Let him stay." By noon, the protest had turned into a movement. Hundreds of supporters gathered around the mansion, holding signs with Jacques' image and slogans like, "He waited then, he waits now," and "Let loyalty lead reform." Emily arrived at the scene shortly after. She pushed through the crowd, emotions overflowing. When Jacques saw her, his tail thumped once against the stone. He stood calmly and walked toward her. She knelt, wrapping her arms around him, trying not to cry. "You stubborn, brilliant boy," she whispered. "What are you trying to tell them now?" That afternoon, the governor invited Emily into the mansion for a private meeting. He'd been following her story. He had seen the footage. And now, with the public rallying behind her again, he was ready to listen. Inside, Emily and the governor talked for over an hour. They discussed her wrongful conviction, the broken systems that failed her, and how many others had no voice, no loyal K9 to speak for them. And that's when Emily made her proposal. She laid out a plan for a state-backed program that would fund independent forensic reviews for officers and civilians who claim wrongful conviction, provide retirement resources for K9 South who can no longer serve, establish a whistleblower unit within law enforcement to prevent cover-ups like the one that nearly cost her life, train future officers in ethics, accountability, and emotional intelligence, with an emphasis on the human K9 bond. The governor listened carefully. By the end of the conversation, he shook her hand and said, "I don't make promises on impulse, but I've never seen a dog move a state before. And I've certainly never seen one spark a bill." 2 weeks later, the state legislature introduced what would become known as the Jacques Act. The bill passed with overwhelming support. Public approval skyrocketed. Officers from other states began asking for similar programs. Police departments requested Emily and Jacques to speak at graduations. Universities created criminal justice modules inspired by their case. Even the FBI invited Emily to consult on ethics training. And Jacques? He never let it change him. He still slept at her feet, ate at the same times, and took his morning patrol around the farm. But once a month, they returned to the governor's mansion, not to protest, but to walk together past the gates, sit beneath the trees, and remind the world how it all began. From silence, from loyalty, from a dog who simply refused to move on until the truth came forward. Emily once said, "During a press conference, we think of dogs as followers. But sometimes, they're the leaders we didn't know we needed." The years that followed the passing of the Jacques Act were full of movement and transformation. But Emily Rains never allowed herself to get comfortable. Even though she'd been publicly cleared, honored, and hailed as a symbol of justice, the ghosts of her past still followed her. At night, she still woke up from dreams of the cell, the cold, the silence, the chains, the unfairness, and always Jacques' absence. He'd returned to her, but the scar of those lost months had etched itself too deeply in her mind to ever fully disappear. It was Jacques who kept her grounded. He never judged her moments of silence, never questioned the days she spent walking the woods behind the farm, alone. He simply stayed close, tail wagging, eyes focused, ever watchful. He wasn't just her shadow, he was her anchor. By the 3rd anniversary of her release, the Jacques Project had grown far beyond what Emily ever imagined. It had helped overturn 9 wrongful convictions, supported the safe retirement of 76 service dogs, and created scholarships for aspiring law enforcement officers who valued integrity over ambition. But success came with attention, and not all of it was welcome. One morning, As Emily prepared for a flight to New York for a conference on criminal reform, she received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "They didn't work alone." Attached was a single video file. Emily hesitated. She'd received hoaxes before, conspiracy theorists, angry ex-officers who still believed she was guilty, or unstable individuals seeking attention. But something about this email felt different. The tone, the wording, the silence. She opened the video. It showed grainy security footage from the night of the raid, not from a body cam, but from a streetlight camera 2 blocks away. The angle was wide, but unmistakable. Emily's team entering the warehouse. Seconds later, a black SUV with no police markings pulled around back, its headlights off. From that SUV, 2 figures exited, one of them matching Captain Wexley's build, the other unknown. The SUV wasn't in any of the original reports. Emily sat back in her chair, breath shallow. "There's more," she whispered. She sent the video to Heller, who now ran the legal division of the K9’s project. Within hours, he confirmed the footage's authenticity. "We missed it," he admitted. "Everyone did. But whoever sent this, they know more than we do." 4. The first time in a year, Emily felt the weight of suspicion return. Had Wexley been covering for someone? Was there a deeper conspiracy in play? If so, what was the real purpose of deleting the footage and framing her? Was Miguel Castillo truly an innocent bystander, or was he involved in something bigger? Questions flooded her mind, but Jacques sensed her unease. He paced near the door, eyes flicking toward her as if waiting for a command. Emily stood, grabbed her keys, and said quietly, "Let's go." They drove straight to Houston, the site of the original raid. The warehouse had long been condemned and fenced off, but Emily wasn't interested in the building. She wanted to walk the perimeter, see the path of that black SUV, trace its movements like she would in her early years of patrol. Jacques walked beside her, ears alert, nose twitching at familiar smells. As they reached the back alley shown in the video, Jacques stopped. He sniffed the cracked concrete, then looked at Emily and sat. He pawed the ground, not digging, but marking. She crouched beside him and noticed something strange. A tiny metallic glint half buried in a patch of gravel. She brushed it off and found a silver dog tag, not Jacques's, but a military ID tag worn by human soldiers. The name was mostly scratched off, except for the last name, Castillo. Emily's heart jumped. "Miguel had a brother," she murmured, "didn't he?" Later that evening, back in Austin, Heller confirmed it. Miguel Castillo's older brother, Luis Castillo, had served in a covert operations unit overseas. Discharged quietly. No public records of his missions. And currently missing. But 6 years ago, he was briefly employed by a private security firm, one known for contracting with law enforcement during high-risk raids. That firm had ties to, and funding from, the same district office that pushed so aggressively to convict Emily. Suddenly, the narrative shattered. Miguel may not have been a bystander. He might have been a pawn. Or worse, bait. Heller suspected the warehouse raid had been more than a drug bust. It may have been a covert operation gone wrong, one involving unauthorized forces and civilians used as shields. When the truth started to leak, someone needed a scapegoat. And Emily, loyal, quiet, and without political allies, became the perfect sacrifice. Emily felt the old anger rising again, not just for herself, but for Jacques. He had known something wasn't right. That's why he refused to leave. That's why he waited at the courthouse. Why he howled the night of her sentencing. Because he felt the betrayal in his bones. Now, with new names and new evidence, Emily and Heller reopened the case again. Not to clear her name, but to reveal the full truth. The press learned of the dog tag, the footage, the possibility of a deeper cover-up. Public interest exploded once more. But Emily didn't want fame. She wanted answers. Jacques, now older and slower, still stood by her side as the truth came full circle. His steps weren't as sharp, his fur dusted with gray, but his eyes burned with the same intensity. He was no longer just a loyal K9. He was the guardian of a truth buried deep, a truth the system had tried to erase. And now it was time to dig it up. Through months of quiet investigation, Emily and Heller had connected the dots no one else dared to. Luis Castillo, Miguel's older brother and a decorated covert operator, had vanished from public life years ago, but they discovered he'd been covertly hired during a classified federal-state collaboration that went far beyond routine narcotics busts. The Houston warehouse wasn't just a storage site. It had been a covert drop point tied to a rogue intelligence operation, one the public was never meant to hear about. Emily had stumbled into a firestorm without knowing it. The missing footage? Deleted not to protect Wexley, but to hide federal involvement. She was collateral damage in a secret gone wrong. Wexley wasn't the mastermind. He was just a pawn, paid to stay silent, to frame her, and ensure no fingers pointed higher. And now, the truth sat in Heller's hands. Phone records, emails, encrypted logs. Enough to burn reputations from Washington to Texas. Emily had a choice. Expose it all, or protect the very country she once swore to serve. The night she made her decision, she sat on the farmhouse porch. The stars were out, and the breeze carried the scent of pine and the faint rustle of distant crickets. Jacques lay beside her, head resting on her foot, his breathing slower these days, his eyes a little cloudier. "Do we tell them everything?" she whispered, running her hand down his back. "Do we rip it all open?" Jacques didn't answer, but he looked up at her, the way he always had, as if to say, "Whatever choice you make, I'm with you." So she made it. The next morning, Emily called a press conference. She didn't name every individual involved, nor did she expose top-secret documents. But she told the story, the real story, the raid, the setup, the betrayal, the silencing of truth in the name of image and order. And most importantly, she told the world about Jacques. How did we uncover it? She asked before a silent, crowded hall, because of a dog. Because when I was locked away, abandoned by my own, he stayed. When the world said I was guilty, he waited. When I was sentenced to death, he barked. The room stood in a long, heavy silence. I wasn't saved by the system. I was saved by loyalty. And now I ask this country, who do we really trust? The badge or the one who never left? The room erupted in applause. But even louder was the echo on social media. The video of her speech became the most shared video that week. Not just for what she said, but for what came next. At the end of the speech, she brought Jacques on stage. He climbed slowly, his legs stiffer with age, his coat grayer, but his presence still electric. He stood beside her, looked at the crowd, then at her, and barked, once, loud, final. The world listened. In the weeks that followed, the Jacques Project received millions in new donations. Whistleblowers from other departments came forward. Congressional hearings were announced. Accountability swept across state and federal levels. Some officials resigned. Others were indicted. New laws were drafted for K9 retirement, body cam transparency, and law enforcement integrity. Emily refused to run for office or accept a political role. "I'm a soldier," she said, "not a politician." But she did one thing she never thought she'd do again. She returned to training, not for patrol, not for combat, but to teach. At the newly founded Jacques Academy for Ethical Policing, Emily led courses on accountability, crisis ethics, and canine integration. She didn't teach with books. She taught with scars, with truth, with stories no textbook dared to write. Jocks, despite his age, was there every morning, trotting slowly alongside her, watching cadets with his sharp eyes. The young officers adored him. Some brought treats. Others just sat with him quietly between drills. He became the academy's guardian, the soul of the mission. One evening, after a long day of lectures and workshops, Emily sat in the academy courtyard with Jocks resting beside her. The sun dipped low, casting an amber hue across the field. Wind stirred the flags along the memorial wall, a wall etched with the names of officers who had fallen in the line of duty. Among them now was a new plaque in honor of Jocks, who waited, who watched, who believed. Emily touched the plaque gently, her voice soft. "We changed the world, partner, you and me." Jocks didn't respond. He was breathing softly, his head on her boot like always. She felt something shift in her chest. A stillness, a knowing. As stars blinked into the sky above, Jocks closed. His eyes, peacefully, quietly. No pain, no fear. Just peace. Emily held him until the last breath. Her tears fell onto his fur. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't wail. She just whispered, over and over, "Thank you. Thank you." The world mourned with her. Memorials were held in every state. Police dogs across the country were honored with new standards of care. Statues of Jocks were placed in front of academies, courthouses, and parks. The story of his loyalty became required reading in training schools. And Emily? She kept going. Because Jocks didn't stay behind for her to stop. He waited, not just for her justice, but for a mission far greater. A mission she now carried alone, but never without him. In her heart, he was always walking beside her. And in the quiet moments between speeches and reforms, she still spoke to him. "We did it, partner." We barked back. And the world listened.